I was in my car a few weeks ago with a passenger, and she looked at me and she said, Millennial STEAM, the world's about two things, getting it on and money. And I said, it really took you 3 decades to come to that conclusion. And she just looked down and she didn't like what she had just said. A few minutes ago, she wrote that she wanted to get something, and I said, you know what? I'm about to go to the Asian place for you know what, and there was no reply. She knew what it meant. She didn't like what it meant. And therefore, she went somewhere else. She went in a different direction. She pivoted in a way in which it wouldn't include me, which I'm happy for. Anyhow, that out of the way. At some point last week or the week before, someone asked me to give a psychological profile of myself. So today, using the act as, I told ChatGPT, act as a psychiatrist and give me your opinion of what I am. What's wrong with me, Dr. ChatGPT? I don't recommend you do this for a lot of people out there. I have a background in psychology. I know how to do psychology things. I know the BS that comes along with it, and there was. At one point it told me that I needed to spend more time with my child. It's not perfect. It's not even close to perfect. If you're having thoughts that you shouldn't be having, I highly recommend that you go see someone. That's my public service announcement. Anyhow, I do have talking points and I do have an introduction. So after I asked it to do this, it said MS psychology seems shaped by a complex mix of resilience and frustration, intellectual curiosity, and lots of loneliness. That is me in a nutshell. And with that said, let's get into our three talking points. I cut off the fourth one because it wasn't really in line with what I would want to talk about today. So here are my titles: The Conflict Between Personal Value and External Expectation, The Cost of Compromising Authenticity, The Role of Social Media in a Hustle Culture. I don't understand why it regenerates these same talking points, but I always take chunks out of the talking points. I don't like reading the talking points verbatim. So here we go. First talking point. Many of us feel pressure to conform to social norms. It's what we do. From the moment we come into this world, there are social norms that we need to adhere to. The way that our body is shaped, the way that our personality has to be good, the way in which we are going to accept education as our salvation, because that's all you have. When you don't come from a resource that's able to give you a solid financial platform, a foundation, when you have to start digging in the dirt to build your own foundation of financial stability, it is very difficult because financial stability is usually generational stability, just like systemic poverty can be generational poverty. So when you come into this world and you have nothing, your first thought is you have to start acting like the people that have money. You don't want to start acting like the people who live in the ghetto because their perspective on life is very much so deep rooted in just plain survival. The people that I have met that come from those very rough areas are rough individuals. Even the women have told me in the past, and this is a massage therapist that told me this. I'm going to say about 2 months ago, she said, when you live in the hood, you always have to be prepared for a fight. I've never felt that way anywhere that I've lived. I mean, my neighborhood is pretty rough. I mean, I would say just more like run down rather than rough. The area around it is very nice. This particular area is definitely not the best area. But you do have to come back to adhere to social norms. You have to behave as a civilized person in a world in which you have a civilized job. I work in education. There's a certain expectation that you're going to come to work and behave like a normie. You're going to come to work, you're going to adhere to the dress code to some extent. You're going to engage in polite conversation, avoiding topics that may not be very office friendly, like politics. We're talking about your uncle that has certain thoughts on people of color. Like we all have those people around us who can't turn the filter down even when they're in a public space. I've had to tell many of my coworkers that this is not the place to tell us about how you feel about people who think certain ways. So you have to conform to social norms, especially in the workplace, and this can lead to a disconnect between who we are and who we're expected to be. No one wants to be called a normie, but we are all normies. To some extent, we are all normies. During my studies of World War II, and the change in behavior that can happen between authority and subject, it is amazing how quickly we can assimilate to situations in which we know that what we're doing is wrong, but because of the situation, we have to adjust our social norms. We adjust them all of the time. We adjust these social norms depending on where we are. If you are at a fancy party, you're going to try and behave more so than if you're working or you're hanging out with your thuggish friends and everyone's cursing. That was one of the hardest things for me to do, was to try to fit in when I started working in retail, because everyone cursed in retail. It's a completely different world than working in a white collar job like I have, where cursing is frowned upon and shouldn't be done in the workplace. Every other word when I worked in retail was a curse word. And of course, I started to turn. I could feel myself starting to conform to societal norms in that particular location. But I did come from being in a classroom, in a university classroom, working in a university job into retail. So it was very strange, that transformation that I had to make in order to fit into retail norm. Talking point number two. People often sacrifice their true selves to fit into roles they don't truly connect with, which can lead to long term unhappiness. In corporate culture, you often have to come into work, put on your phony smile, put on your clothes that you don't like wearing, talk to people you don't want to talk to, be nice to people that you don't like, and behave in a manner in which it makes you terribly unhappy. I don't like the workplace. I will never like the workplace. No matter what job I have, I will never like hourly work, because hourly work is the tool of the devil. And sadly, you are still expected to come into work and pretend. You have to pretend to be happy at work. In fact, I wrote one of these chat GPT's stories with the perspective of exactly what I had said earlier, but I added, write as if you have unbound optimism. And it talked about how great it is to come into work on Monday and fill your day with exciting activities, something that was giving me the gag reflex on how positive it was. But corporations truly expect their miserable workers to come into these jobs and pretend, remember, pretend to adhere to the necessary norms of every single white collar job. Some of us just don't like to connect with these types of jobs, but unfortunately, there really isn't much other industry out there. We can't go out and do what we want. For the most part, we have to work in the places that will hire us. And as people that are not desirable to be hired, especially myself, I've struggled to find employment throughout my entire life, because when you have my personality, I'm not coming to work to make small chat with you. I'm not coming to work to be your friend. I'm not coming to work to be work to the nth degree. As one of my coworkers famously said, I come to work to do enough work so that I can keep my job, and that's it. We have all come to the conclusion that you pretend to pay me, I pretend to work, and that's how it's going to stay until one of us gets fired, because eventually someone will lose their job, especially those quiet quitters. Gen Z believes that they can just come into the workplace, behave like wild animals, and that they will somehow be able to keep their jobs. Gen Z is getting fired at a rate that is abominable. I mean, they literally are coming in, rejecting the norms of the workplace, and then wondering why no one will hire them. You're expected to behave in a certain way. You're expected to have a certain level of performance. You're expected to come into work and pretend that you don't have the utmost disdain for the way that the system expects you to conform to that situation. Gen Z is going to have a very hard time dealing with the 8 hour day, dealing with micromanagement, and dealing with the constant job loss. Because just finishing college doesn't justify a high wage. In fact, getting out of college means you're going into your first entry level position. And as Gen Z, that entry level position may become your every position for the rest of your life. Because if you're coming into entry level position one after another, you're never going to be able to build up experience. If you're getting 6 months to 1 year of experience, that's not going to count. You can't just use 6 months and just keep adding 6 months and 6 months when you're not growing as an employee. Every employer expects to do some training, but for the most part, they do want you to come in with very, very basic abilities to adapt to your situation and overcome. In fact, that was one of the personality traits that ChatGPT built into my personality test, is that you have the ability to see the situation and look at it and realize that this isn't going to make you happy. You either have to adapt or move on. Those are the only options that are out there for you, because if you stay in that job, and I see this with my own coworkers right now, the job isn't going to adjust itself so that you're not poor. The job is there so that you can do it to the extent that you want to do it. But beyond that, it doesn't care that you don't have a career. It doesn't care that you don't make enough money. It doesn't care if your boss treats you like you're a mindless, single celled animal that doesn't like working. Your boss is going to come down on you as hard as he has to in order to get the productivity that he wants. And you if he doesn't like you, you're gone. That's really what it comes down to. In a right to work state, your boss can come down and say, you know what, we're just going to move along. We've had to, in the past 3 years, we've had four senior managers, and every one of them from day one knew that this job was temporary. Even the current one right now is realizing that there's just not going to be any way of getting the work done. And it's going to fall on his shoulders, meaning he's going to be seen as the problem. And they will find a way to get rid of him sooner rather than later. All right, our final talking point here is going to be: there's a constant pressure to appear successful, constantly busy, and always achieving. This is what our society expects from every worker. You're not allowed to be pessimistic about the economy. Even if you're working at Taco Bell, there's a constant pressure to appear successful, and that you're constantly busy towards achieving something, that you're always supposed to be ambitious regardless of where you are. You could be washing cars, you could be unplugging a toilet, whatever you're doing. There's a certain societal pressure that says you must be working towards building a successful life. Just because life gave you grapes and you don't know what to do with the fact that you don't have money, a good job, a decent relationship, your promobile is on its last leg, and you can't find a job that pays more than the minimum wage. There's a lot of people that are like that. There's millions of people who, despite all obstacles, despite living in survival mode for most of their life. In fact, I was talking to this lady at work the other day that she's a really important person, and she was telling me that it's only a matter of time before I reach the success that she reached. And let me tell you this: when she said how long it took for her to get to her dream home, I hope all your tighty whities drop down between your ankles, because she didn't say it was a couple of bad years. She didn't say it was a couple of bad decades. When she told me how long it took for her to get out of the bad neighborhood that she lived in to get to where she lives now, 60 years she had to live in the bad neighborhood before she could afford her current dream home. That means that most of us will not make it to our dream home. And the whole idea of reaching success within one lifetime is probably very slim. And this is a person that is, I would consider to be very successful. She's a top executive person in the corporation. She may not have the title of chief, but she rubs elbows with them all day long. This is a person who had to force the last president of my office to evacuate the building when it became unsafe. She this is how she put it to me. This is these are her words. I had to call first responders in order to get that person out of that building because there was a chance that it was going to collapse under the damage that it had received, and she wouldn't listen. And I was just like, oh my God. I mean, I knew this person was stubborn, but I didn't realize that it was this level of being stubborn in the workplace. So, with all of that said, in toxic positivity, I have to believe that more people are out there understanding that their financial circumstances are not the cause of their being lazy. I know that the proletariat likes buying lottery tickets, that selling education to the proletariat is something that the elites will always be able to do because it gives them at least the hope. And when people lose all hope, like myself, I lost hope in life probably the moment that I was born that anything would get better for me. I just don't see it. I don't see things changing. I don't see government adjusting. I see things getting worse progressively as everything becomes more expensive and our society tries to blame you, the individual, for just simply not being more lucky when it comes to being able to gather resources like rich people. If you if you watch Dave Ramsey, he's a perfect example of a person telling you that you're poor because of all the bad decisions that you've made. I've had this conversation with my own management on many occasions that it's simply my not trying hard enough and that my blaming the system is the reason why I can't get ahead in life. That I made poor decisions with my education, I make poor decisions with my paychecks, and that everything is my fault. And when I look at the size of most people's paychecks, these paychecks aren't $150,000 a year. The average paycheck for a person down there working part time at a McDonald's is going to look like $800 every 2 weeks. In fact, I published that video a couple months ago where a guy asked, like, how am I supposed to make a life on $800 every 2 weeks? And the reality is, you're not. It's not real money. It's almost a slap in the face to tell people you need to start doing better while offering them tiny little paychecks. And in order to keep them motivated, you offer them the McDonald's Happy Meal toy. And when they don't respond in the way that you're expecting them to, you start doing layoffs to increase the productivity, because nothing increases productivity like scaring people by telling them that they're not going to have a job if they don't meet these minimum performance metrics. Anyhow, my chicken is cooking right now. I think it's getting to the point where it might be overcooked. So I will talk to you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys are having a great Sunday afternoon.